The bus was crowded that morning. People were hurrying to work, heads buried in their phones, earbuds in, lost in their own little worlds. Among them, Mark, a man in his late 30s with tired eyes and a kind smile, clutched the overhead rail, standing in the aisle. His day had started like any other: rushed coffee, traffic, emails piling up, but that one small choice he was about to make would change everything. As the bus pulled up to the next stop, the doors opened, and an elderly woman slowly stepped on, gripping a worn-out purse. She scanned the crowded bus, looking for a place to sit, but every seat seemed taken. Her face fell, and for a brief second, Mark felt a pang in his chest. Without thinking, he stepped aside and offered her his seat. Her eyes lit up, a soft smile breaking through the weariness etched on her face. "Thank you, young man," she said, her voice trembling slightly. And in that moment, Mark didn't know it, but he was about to witness something truly extraordinary, a reminder of why small acts of kindness matter more than we can imagine. Before we dive into this story, if you love hearing real-life tales that warm the heart and inspire you to be kinder every day, make sure to subscribe to Kindness Story Hub, give this video a thumbs up, and leave a comment about a moment when someone's kindness changed your day. Your story could inspire someone else, just like the story you're about to hear. The bus continued on its route, slowing and stopping as it made its way through the busy city streets. Mark watched the elderly woman settle into his seat, clutching her purse to her chest, and he felt a strange warmth spread through him. He returned to standing, holding the rail, but couldn't help sneaking glances at her from the corner of his eye. She looked around nervously at the busy commuters, and he noticed something in her expression, a mix of relief and gratitude, almost like a weight had lifted from her shoulders. Mark smiled to himself and thought about how often he rushed through life, rarely pausing to notice the small struggles of others. But this moment felt different. This felt important. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the bus. A young man, maybe in his early 20s, was arguing loudly with another passenger over a dropped backpack. Voices rose, and tension crackled through the air like electricity. Mark felt the familiar surge of frustration creeping up, ready to join the chorus of impatience. But then he looked back at the elderly woman, her hands tightened around her purse, and she looked worried. And just like that, Mark remembered something his mother used to say: kindness is contagious. One small act can stop a chain of anger before it starts. He took a deep breath and decided not to step into the argument. Instead, he subtly shifted closer to the woman, offering a quiet smile of reassurance. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The young man and the passenger glared at each other, voices still raised, but Mark's calm presence seemed to diffuse some of the tension. Then, as if sensing the shift, the young man's shoulders slumped, and he muttered something under his breath before retreating to another part of the bus. The air felt lighter. Mark turned his attention back to the elderly woman. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "Yes, thanks to you," she whispered. "It's been a hard week. Just sitting here, feeling someone notice me, makes a world of difference." Mark nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. He didn't know her story, didn't know what struggles she was carrying, but he did know this: kindness, even in its simplest form, can ripple far beyond what we see. As the bus continued, Mark and the woman began to talk. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, and she lived alone in a nearby neighborhood. Her husband had passed away a few years ago, and her children lived across the country. She told Mark about her week, small challenges that felt overwhelming: missed medication, a broken washing machine, loneliness that felt heavier than the city streets outside. Mark listened, truly listened, without interrupting or offering cliches. He realized how rare it was to just listen to someone, to really notice them without judgment. And in that simple act of attention, something remarkable happened. When the bus stopped near her apartment, Mrs. Thompson hesitated. "You don't have to get off yet," Mark said. "I'll see you out." She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to brighten the dim bus interior. "You're a good soul," she said. "Not many people would do what you did this morning." Mark shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed by the praise. "I just gave up my seat. That's all." "Ah," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "But giving someone a seat when they feel invisible, it's more than just something. It's a lifeline. And sometimes, it's the first step toward everything changing." When the bus doors opened, she stepped off, and Mark followed her to the sidewalk. As she reached for her apartment keys, her purse slipped from her hand and spilled onto the ground. Papers, photos, and a small envelope fluttered in the breeze. "Oh, dear," she murmured, bending to gather the papers. Mark knelt beside her, helping collect everything. As he handed her the last photo, a faded picture of her and her late husband, she paused. Her hands shook slightly. "You know," she said softly, "my husband always believed in kindness. He used to say it could move mountains. I think he's smiling down at this moment right now." Mark felt a lump in his throat again. He didn't know what to say. And then, Mrs. Thompson reached into her purse and handed him the envelope. "Take this," she said. "It's not much, but I want you to have it. For the next person you help." Mark opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a small stack of bills, enough to cover a week's groceries, and a handwritten note: "Kindness comes back in ways you cannot imagine. Pass it forward." He looked up at her, speechless. The woman he had barely known had just entrusted him with something deeply personal, an act of generosity that mirrored the kindness he had shown her. Over the next few weeks, Mark thought a lot about that moment on the bus. He realized that kindness wasn't just a moral lesson or a feel-good story. It was real, tangible, and powerful. That small act, giving up his seat, had created a ripple effect, touching someone deeply and inspiring generosity in return. One day, Mark decided to take the envelope and use it to help another person in need. He bought lunch for a homeless man he passed on his way to work. He donated to a local shelter. Each act, no matter how small, reminded him of the chain reaction that kindness could create. He even started noticing small gestures in everyday life: holding the door for a stranger, complimenting a colleague, helping a neighbor carry groceries. And every time he did, he remembered Mrs. Thompson's words: "Kindness comes back in ways you cannot imagine." Months later, Mark ran into Mrs. Thompson again. She was sitting on a park bench, feeding pigeons, smiling in the sunlight. "Mark," she called. "Come sit with me." As he joined her, she handed him a small card. "Look what arrived in the mail," she said. Inside was a photograph of a little boy, smiling widely, holding a thank you card. On the back, it read, "Thank you for helping my grandmother that day on the bus. You changed our lives." Mark felt tears prick at his eyes. That one small, simple act, giving up a seat, had not only brightened Mrs. Thompson's day but had created a lasting impact on her family. It was in that moment that Mark fully understood the power of kindness. It wasn't about grand gestures or heroic acts. It was about noticing someone in need, stepping outside of your own rush, and offering a moment of care. That was enough to change lives. As he walked home that evening, Mark thought about the thousands of small opportunities for kindness that exist every day. A smile for the cashier. A call to a lonely friend. Letting someone merge in traffic. These weren't just polite gestures, they were lifelines, sparks that could ignite hope in ways we can't foresee. And he realized something even more profound: kindness doesn't just help the person on the receiving end. It transforms the giver too. It opens your heart, sharpens your empathy, and reminds you of our shared humanity. So, the next time you feel rushed, tired, or overwhelmed, remember Mark and Mrs. Thompson. Remember that giving up a seat, offering a smile, or simply listening could be the most meaningful thing you do all day. Because kindness has a way of coming back to us, often in ways we never expected, and sometimes, it can change lives forever. If there's one thing this story teaches us, it's that our actions matter. Every small act of kindness, no matter how ordinary it seems, has the power to create extraordinary change. The world can feel heavy and busy, but it's in these tiny, compassionate gestures that we find hope, connection, and meaning. So go ahead, be the person who notices, who helps, who cares. Your kindness might be the light that someone needs today. And who knows? One day, you might witness a life-changing moment, just like Mark did, because in the end, kindness isn't just something we do. It's who we are. And it has the power to change the world, one small act at a time.